were given these lands at very cheap prices. The people that live on the reserve at East and West Rumpel, they don't qualify for land. Why they were not given land? The people that live on the reserve in Sophia, they don't qualify for land. Why they were not given land? And they are closer to the lands at Ogle that were given out. So you have a situation where you give out tens of acres of land to people, and at the same time you fail to give land to ordinary people. Even people who were supporters did not benefit from land giveaway. It is just a handful of people. All the lands that were given up, large expanses of land, it is only a handful of persons that were given these lands. And that is what the ordinary people should pay attention to. The ordinary supporter of the People's National Congress. The single mother who desperately wants to have her own home so that she stops paying the type of rent she's paying. The young professional family, a man and wife that has gotten married, that desperately need their own home. Why Mr. Benn didn't pay attention to those persons, to give them maybe quarter acre, half acre plot, so that they can build their homes. So all the people who have benefited are not ordinary people.
But interestingly, if I can make this point about how selective they are, why didn't Harman and the others rush to South Rhineville and stood up there for the Afro-Guyanese couple whose land was taken away by Trevor Benn and given to Christopher Jones for his barbershop project?
Yeah, so that's the point.
You have a whole Afro-Guyanese family whose land was being taken away.
And you would have the likes like Christopher Jones, as I said in the Parliament, talking about representing black interests. And the Rastaman and his wife was very much Afro-Guyanese, but they were on that plot of land, as they testified, for 30 years. You know, he maybe would have just been born. And he, we colluded with Trevor Benn, and they pushed those people off of that land and made it available to him. So it is nothing that they did was in the interest of the ordinary people. Patterson that is protesting for Trevor Benn, you know, the money that he took and buy his bed, maybe he could have buy several beds for ordinary people that need beds and mattresses. The money he took to buy his bangle and bracelet from government funds, you understand me? It could have helped ordinary people, poor people, in their homes. The $6 million that was given to Cathy used by herself, that could have helped ordinary people. So what it is showing is that they don't care about the ordinary people. What they do deliberately is when they are not in power, they fan those flames and they utilize ordinary Afro-Guyanese to create conditions that they can be in power. That is what they do. But when they get power, you see that they don't care about anybody. And 5 years experience, we have experienced these people the last 5 years in government. How many houses they have built for single mother? How many core homes they have built, subsidized by the government for single? How many lands they have given out for under $100,000 to ordinary people? So those are the questions ordinary people, with your emotion and excitement, they must pay attention to. And in the case of Brian Tiwari, they sold him this wire for 200 million. And he paid 20 million, and that's the end of the story. And he was utilizing it all the time for years. And this wire is valued $5 billion Guyana. So, look what the sale, let us say the 200 million, even though it's outlandish to sell it for that. If they had demanded that $200 million, look how much services could have been given to ordinary people. Look, lands could have been developed to be given to ordinary people. But they had no interest. Joe Harman and the cabal had no interest in calling B.T. Tiwari to go, because Brian Tiwari and Joe Harman, everybody in the country know they were buddies. So this clamor and this chant about they have ordinary Afro-Guyanese at heart is just baloney, and that's what it is. And importantly, we must recognize this. You know, Eddie, when the People's Progressive Party was in opposition for that period, you know what we discussed in this country? It's policies and programs. But check these people, the opposition PNC. What they are discussing since they were thrown into office. They are yet to discuss and bring before the Guyanese people any policy or program that they think can benefit them. They criticize some of ours, but that is the end of it.
No alternative.
There is no alternative to what
we see it
could
in the
have
budget
been.
debates. We saw it in the budget debates. We saw when they had the opportunity to really scrutinize the policies, programs, initiatives in the budget during the consideration of the estimates. And they started to create all sorts of smoke screen to create confusion in the parliament. But I wanted to make this point, Minister, as you were speaking about making lands available to average poor Guyanese, regardless, Afro-Guyanese or otherwise. I wanted to focus on 3 of the transactions that Mr. Benn were involved in, and the people who were selected or who benefited. Forget completely whether they're Afro-Guyanese or Indo-Guyanese. The one that dealt with the ogle, it was a mixture of people who benefited from those lands, but they were all wealthy people.
And some of them not Guyanese.
Exactly. It wasn't a case where the lands of ogle were taken and tried to put into small parcels so that the average poor people, like you mentioned, those in Sophia and others, can benefit from. If you look at the land that was sold to Sevon's Waste Management, it was to one company, not lands that were taken and distributed to the poor people in South Georgetown. If you look at the transaction to deal with the lands that were sold to the board member, again, land that valued $60 million, by the way, which the first government valuation came back, Trevor Benn sent it back, and one came back to 13.6 million, I think, if I have 13.5 million, and he sold for that. So the people who were benefiting, if you look at the work that was sold, it wasn't sold to average poor Afro or Indo-Guyanese to say, own a share in this property. It was sold to Brian Tiwari. If you look at the transaction that James Bond was involved in with Eddie Dulal and the other Jagnan guy, it was for a small group, and the representation that you're seeing from Harman and the others is for a small cabal, an elitist group, and not necessarily average Guyanese, whether they're Afro-Guyanese or Indo-Guyanese.
But what they do is that they hope to rile up the people whose interests they did not look after. And that is the total evil in this matter here. That the people whose interests, the people who they did not care for, you know, the young lady who made allegation about Minister McCoy assaulting her, she took £20,000 and invested in a scholarship for herself. not for 20 Afro-Guyanese over a period. She, this Mr. Beater, what's her name? £20,000, and she, as Minister of the Public Service, she did not make £20,000 available to 20 Afro-Guyanese or any Guyanese. She made it available to herself. And you know what is scandalous? There is no evidence that with all of that money that was spent, she has even passed and graduated from this program.
Did she enroll?
Well, that's another question. Simona Brooms and her 2 children, $20 million spent on them. Why they didn't spend $20 million on 20 worthy poor people, supporters of PNC, Afro-Guyanese, Indo-Guyanese, Amerindian, whatever. But it was spent on Simona Brooms' children. Miss, what's her name? Pagwali. I never remember her name.
Former education minister.
Former education minister. Again, millions of dollars spent on her for her so-called doctorate in inverted commas. There's still question mark whether she completed and she has a doctorate or not. Anna Ferguson, again, millions spent on her to do some master's program. Again, Eddie, there are still question marks whether she was able to get a master's or she ended up with mysteries. So the point is, and people must pay attention to these matters, every activity and action of this last government was interested only in fortifying themselves and their relatives and their close cronies, not the people. That is how they function, that is how they go, in all respect. So this chant here, now, and you know, Eddie, even though we have to debunk this, I am impressed that Guyanese, even supporters of the PNC, they have seen through their game. They have seen through their game. And that is the reason why you would note that people are coming forward to collaborate and cooperate with the government. Because they see the government, the PPP see the government, giving benefits to the people and really interested in giving benefits to the people. Whether they be farmer, whether they be whichever region they reside in and whatever type of activity they're involved in. And that is, let me say this, that is what is creating the hysterical behavior at Congress Place. It is the fact that in many communities, that they, in their heads, think that we will not be welcome. They're seeing the government, beginning from the president right now, being welcomed in those communities. And importantly, people are seeking out their own benefit. They're not waiting on Congress Place. They're seeking their benefit in regions, in villages, and they're embracing and they're coming forward to put their cases on the table before the government. And in the last 6 months, we have responded. And we have governed and we will continue to govern. Not by race, nor by party affiliation. As the president has said, we will govern in the interest and for the benefit of all the Guyanese people. That is the bottom line. So this PNC group, they have nothing to bring onto the table to discuss development and programs for development. So the only thing left for them to continue to put out there is the issue of race. to divide people and to bring people together. And I suspect that as they get more desperate, they would attempt to find more flames of this unity and try to create conditions where people distrust each other based on their ethnic origin.
But you know the reason, one of the main reasons for that is because, you see, and we always go back to 2015 where APNU had the opportunity to turn anything that the PUP did in the 23 years in office in a negative light, because there was nothing to judge APNU, the PNC, on, at least for a large group of younger Guyanese. The situation now that you have is that younger Guyanese would have seen the APNU+AFC in action over the last 5 years, and they're able to compare that with how the government is operating now, the PUPC government, and before, with the 5 years of APNU. And when one looks at what has happened, in the 5 years, the people in Tiger Bay are in the same situation, and they're predominantly Afro-Guyanese. The people living on the reserves in Sophia are in the same condition, the same situation. They are predominantly Afro-Guyanese. South Georgetown is still flooding, and South Georgetown is predominantly Afro-Guyanese. You cannot want to use, and that is what I think they're doing, they're using Afro-Guyanese as political pawns. The only time they know that they're representing Afro-Guyanese is when they want to stir up racial hostilities. That's the only time. When they were in power for 5 years, they failed to even look at, I saw stories, and I'm sure you saw stories, of Afro-Guyanese who said that we voted for them. When they wanted our vote in 2015, they came to us. Now they changed their numbers and we can't get on to them. When they did, when they moved from office of the president to square of the revolution, taking the government to the people just outside of office of the president, they didn't go out there in an open air, in a manner that they can relate to the people. Hamilton and the others set up air-conditioned tents.
And the people have to stand in the sun.
Stand in the sun. So, clearly, what you're hearing now, they're using situations of, and like it or not, Trevor Benn has committed criminal acts by selling those lands. And we haven't looked at the sale of waterfronts, riverfronts, and the sale of Millie's hideout and the gifting of lands across this country that Trevor Benn presided over. We're just dealing with a few transactions here. The reality is he committed criminal offenses, and the government nor the PPP don't conduct criminal investigations. The police will determine, based on the evidence, what they will do with the evidence. They will pass it to the DPP, and a decision will be made. Like every other person, whether you are Trevor Benn or you're not Trevor Benn, if you're arrested for an offense, the police will keep you for a certain time. There is a limitation. After 72 hours, if they haven't charged you, they will release you. If not, the police will keep you for questioning. It's as simple as that.
But yeah, that is an issue also, Eddie, where somehow, again, many persons, poor people, ordinary people, Afro-Guyanese, they were held and they will continue to be held. 72 hours by the police in investigation. So why Arman and the crew don't even go and chant for those persons? Are they not persons also? Are they not human beings? What is so special about Trevor Benn?
It's very special to Arman.
Yeah? You understand the point I'm making? If you are saying you represent ordinary people, poor people, you have an interest about how Afro-Guyanese are treated, what happened to the other Afro-Guyanese that might be arrested by the police, charged by the police, or kept overnight by the police whilst they're investigating criminal conduct?
Lesser offenses, by the way.
Yeah, yes. Why have you not gone and set up a candle to do vigil? And earlier you spoke, Eddie, and just now you just referred, where the opposition leader, now vice president at that time, he brought evidence to the public to show disposing of government land. Even in one instance where the land that was given to someone by Mr. Trevor Benn extended into the Demerara River. So the river was giving away some 50 acres of land. And then you had another, I think, 100 acres of land, gave away where the sea, the Atlantic Ocean, was part of the lands sold or lease or whatever. So all of these will come. You know, those matters are still there. Those matters are still there to be investigated, because all of those transactions, in large measure, everything that is being said suggests that the Lands and Surveys Commission under Mr. Trevor Benn paid no attention to whose land it was. Apparently, once someone who's a crony or a crook who had a relationship with the former government, they identified a piece of land and they came to the Lands and Surveys Department. Mr. Benn did everything possible to ensure that they get access to that land via whatever methodology. And that is what you see playing out here. Look, Morris Archer, I know him very well. I believe he's not an innocent party in this matter. Because I recall, in the first instance, when that land was occupied, the city council laid claim to that land. Because if I remember, it was Hamilton Green who, in the first instance, made available that land to Mr. Morris Archer. At that time, Mr. Frank Anthony, who was the Minister of Culture, Youth and Sports before they got into government, he said publicly that the city council don't own the land and they properly could not have a person lease it or sell it to them. The land was owned by the by the National Sports Commission. So that was public knowledge. And with all of that, Mr. Benn must have known that the land now belongs to him. Because this was debated publicly in the public press, where City Council via Hamilton Green laid claim to the land and made it available to Mr. Archer at the time. And it was contended that the land belongs to the National Sports Commission. Yet with all of that, Mr. Benn, Trevor Benn, sold the land to Morris Archer for $80 million, according to the evidence presented. So what you want to happen, that this just pass? A man, like I have said earlier when I started out, you got up the road and you carry a man to buy a cousin house that you don't own, and you sell it to him, and you just want your cousin and you just want this matter to just go away. Because the entities that own these properties, they can be considered relatives of the Guyanese Lands and Surveys Commission. Nisil and Gaisuko. But the fact is, just like how Gaisuko or Nisil cannot sell Lands and Surveys land or lease it, it's the same way Lands and Surveys cannot sell or lease the lands that belongs to the other entity. And I believe that all of these transactions that you might see numbers on some paper, the real numbers are under the table in people's pockets. The real, what people paid.
Paid for those lands.
Right? And in one of the instances, the Bayantiwari, one of the issues, where they fabricated the numbers on the transport. This is a fraud to say that this is what he paid when he did not pay that. It was paid for far less, but I think the transport, if I recall, is saying that he paid $400 million when he did not pay $400 million for a piece of property. So you cannot discount even the numbers you see on the transaction documents. that might not be what the businessman really paid, what he really invested in this transaction, because it was a corrupt transaction all over, from start to finish. The James Bond issue with the total corrupt transaction.
But when you look at the issue, I mean, we understand that Harman has his interest to protect, and that's what he's protecting here, trying to be on the side, quote unquote, of Trevor Benn. You say, I'm supporting you, so when you're ready to talk, you should know what to talk. But that is just one part. I believe, too, the other issue is because for the last 6 months, the kind of benefits that are being sent down and delivered to the Guyanese people is more and more, it's exposing how self-serving the APNU+AFC was. So the best shot now is not, or the best shot really is to go to divide the country along ethnic lines. But I believe Guyanese are seeing every day. The fact of the matter is, for example, Minister Ramsey went into Buxton. He made promises to the people in Buxton, and he has fulfilled those promises. He brought benefits to them. He went into President, and him subsequently went into Tiger Bay. They made promises, and they're fulfilling those promises. Minister Ramsey went into communities, and I'm mentioning predominantly Afro-Guyanese communities. To Agricola, he made promises to the people in Agricola. He went back, and he attempted to fulfill them. He's still working on them. The reality is, when you look at what is happening across the country, regardless of the ethnic composition of communities, regardless of the political affiliation of members of communities, the benefits of the country, of state resources are getting to the people, regardless of where they are. And that is where the problem is.
You know what people are learning, Eddie? That this thing that Granger and his bunch was saying it was so difficult to do for me.
It's happening quite easily.
It is happening quite easily. So it means that they were not sincere and they were not honest. Because, you mentioned Buxton. The people in Buxton said 5 years they made the same request to the Granger government to rehabilitate the ground. And they made a request to Minister Ramsey in 1 month, and it was delivered. Several roads that we have done so far in communities, they are making the same statements. They are testifying that they represented and they requested this road to be done, their road in the village, for 5 years. And in 3 months, 5 months, 6 months, the PPP government ensured, not chip seal road, asphalted concrete roads in those communities. So people are learning that, one, there must be that money was somewhere to do these things. But these guys didn't do it. They didn't use it on us. And
they had to get bangles and their cheats.
Secondly, they were trying to suggest it was so difficult to be done. How come the PPP in 6 months? We've been able to do that. If you look at the COVID pandemic issue, they couldn't reach even testing 50 persons a day. And now we have a facility that can test several hundred persons per day. The same staff, they were there. They didn't train them, refused to train them. And now, you know what is laughable? That you hear many of these people in PNC, they're talking about how we're managing the COVID pandemic. At least we're managing it. You understand? They were not managing it at all. They were not managing it at all. And so, all around, you can see that benefits in 6 months. In 6 months, the amount of benefits in several areas and communities that the People's Progressive Party civic government, we have made available. Granger and his government couldn't and didn't do it in 5 years.
But if you quantify it, put a dollar value to it, they spend what, 1.3 trillion. The PPP has spent a part of the 2020 budget because a large part of that budget was spent by APNU.
Yeah.
Now going into the 2021 budget, what? Let's say tops, the PPP has spent $150 billion. What the PPP would have done with that $150 billion, the benefits to communities and people across this country, completely outstrips.
Because
maybe
you can see
of
it.
what they did in 5 years.
You can see it, you can touch it. And that's the point. Look, forever they discussed. I remember Patterson talking about he will make another internationally reported letter or some foolishness like that. The reality is, in a matter of 6 months in government, the letter A strip was commissioned today under the People's Progressive Party. And so many other things. I'm just stating. Patterson talk, every year they talk about the development of the road from Linden to Mabur. They just talk about it. Sometimes lied about it. Even lying to suggest that the British government had made available money for him to do it, when it was a total fabrication and lie. The fact is, Eddie, is that it will be done this year. Already materials is already mobilized to do. So in every area we look at, we can see that what has happened. Look, Minister Pariag said there were hundreds of scholarships to be given to people when she got there under the same Tabitha.
That were not given.
Were not given.
And are now given to people.
And now being given to people. And in less than 6 months, the amount of scholarships Minister Pariag has given out to ordinary people in this country, Tabitha and crew did not do it in 5 years.
I think this is where we have to wrap things up. We're out of time. And as I usually say to you, when we started the conversation starts to heat up, that is when we have to wrap things up. The reality is, if I can, before we go, Minister, if I can say this, is what Trevor Benn has committed criminal offenses. The evidence is there. The police must be allowed, regardless of who, whether it's Trevor Benn, whether it's BK, whoever it is. It doesn't matter the color of the person's skin, the texture of their hair. If you commit a criminal offense, then you have to allow the criminal justice system in our country to work, and the police must be allowed to do their investigations, and let Trevor Benn and anybody else go to the court and prove that they're innocent. Until then, I think Harmon and his gang need to stop trying to divide the people of this country and push this entire issue of racism and the usual divisive rhetoric that you hear from them. Until next time, we want to say thanks for being part of the program, Minister Hamilton. Thanks from your busy schedule to be here today. We want to thank you, our viewers, for being part of the program. Bye for now.